a lot of young people are lacking today, especially those who are raised on technology and they don't like having face-to-face conversations. I'm sure you've heard of the millennial stare. It's tough for a lot of young people, but fortunately for us who have been around, who were raised on interpersonal interaction, and technology was not the first interaction that we had.
I remember talking to a former colleague, and she was like in her 20s, and she was just like, well, our generation, we just don't value the same things that you guys do. She's like, we just
fine.
want,
yeah,
right. I was like, okay, we don't want to be putting in all those extra hours because they fear that it's not going to convert to anything. It's not going to bring them the bigger pay or the salaries or anything. Welcome to A Holistic Dose. We've been through the plot twists, divorce, parenting, burnout, reinvention, and now we're doing midlife with way more honesty and way less BS. Think of us as your unfiltered friends, here to remind you that you're not too late, too old, or too far behind. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Jeanette.
Today we're joined by our guest, Andrea Clement. So she's a freelance writer specializing in health, wellness, and beauty. And you're also an executive as well. And you've been through a number of career changes in your life. So we're really excited to have you here. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Andrea.
Absolutely. Hi, Jeanette. Hi, Tiffany. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah. So you freelance write for, I'm totally like stumped for today.
So I think let's talk about her article. So Andrea, you recently wrote an article in the AJC about people over 50 changing careers, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the topics that I do specialize in for the Atlanta Journal is topics related to aging. And our audience there at Aging in Atlanta is 55 and up officially, but a lot of the topics apply to, 45 and up and all ages, really. And I was excited about this particular topic when I was assigned it because I used to be a recruiter and I also was a career columnist. So it was a topic that was really personal for me and really piqued my interest. And also, incidentally, I'm kind of a lifelong career changer myself. I've had like 4 or 5 different careers over the years.
Wow.
So ranging from elementary school teacher, which is what I did for like 3 years after college, which was a total fail, all the way to medical sales, physician recruiting, sales training, and then became a writer. And now I do PR and writing for several different companies. So
I was really excited about this topic because I'm a divorce attorney. Gray divorce is on the rise. And that's, I think, defined as people over 50, maybe 55, but it is becoming increasingly common. And, standard of living goes down for everybody when you divorce. And so a lot of my clients are in the position where they either haven't worked, they've worked part-time, or they haven't really focused on their earnings that much, and they find themselves in a situation where they need to figure that out after divorce. And so, this is something I'm really looking forward to learning more about.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge, a huge trend and issue that people are facing is the change that you go through financially after divorce. So that definitely can cause a lot of transition with people's careers later in life as well. So it's
I found for myself that it's like you kind of get tired of doing the same thing for so many years, right?
In the same way.
Yeah. So I just got fatigued on, I've loved what I do for a living. And I love being a divorce attorney, but I was getting fatigued from the litigation and really had to learn, like, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I have to do that. And really needed to start thinking about, how do I pivot? How do I use my skills? And I'm still a divorce attorney, but I just tweaked things. So I'm interested in your own career changes. I think people are so fear driven, including, I think that's just normal, right? I'm including myself, like pivoting to something completely different, which you've done. But tell us a little bit about why you made your career transitions.
Sure. So I just kind of went on a detour. I got into the wrong major in college. It was kind of a long story. It was a dispute I was having with my mother at the time. She wanted me to major in something different than what I wanted to major in. And all I ever wanted to do when I was little was to be a writer. That's all I ever wanted to do. And she was like, "You're absolutely not majoring in journalism." And I was devastated. And she just had her mind set. And she really wanted me to major in business, and just to like go against the grain, I ended up majoring in education. I really showed her.
Me too.
And yeah.
And I didn't realize that.
Yep, I have an education degree.
That is so funny. Yeah. So I don't know. I just was wanting to get out of school and start my life. And at that point, I just wanted to have a degree. And really, I've learned that the degree, unless you're going to do something like be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a scientist, really your degree, bachelor's degree, doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. And that's one of the things that I'm kind of proud of with my own track of my own career path, is that I never went back to school. I probably should have, and it probably would have helped maybe accelerate some things. But for me, it just wasn't something that was, I had the bandwidth for. And so I did all of my career transitions without going back to school. I just kind of jumped in, dove in head first, and learned new skills and networked my way into them. And it was just kind of like pure determination a lot of times. And I was scared to death. The first one that I did when I went from teaching school to medical sales was really scary, but I was young enough at the time and just early enough out of college. I'd only been out of college for a few years. So I basically just kind of started over as if I was interviewing again coming out of college, and just kind of, wrote off the mistake of the education career and just said, okay, I'm going to start fresh and I'm going to get into medical sales. So I got into a very entry level medical sales job where they provided training. That's another thing when you're making a career change that helps, is find a job that provides some on the job training. That really helps a lot. So that was key to me. And that was one of the things that was really important. And I had a great trainer, a sales trainer. I had a great boss, and they really nurtured my career and helped me like move up through the ranks and get promoted and try different things within the company. And so that was like a really big leap for me. And then from there, everything kind of happened pretty organically and more easily. I didn't have to make as big of a jump after that. But from there, I went into physician recruiting, because my medical sales job, we were selling products that were going to be phased out. We were actually selling, believe it or not, it was kind of like The Office, the show The Office. We were selling paper products to medical offices. So it literally was exactly like the show. I mean, we had a Phyllis, we had a Michael Scott, we had everybody in our office. We had all those personalities, and it was a fun job at the time. But I knew long term, this is not going to be, selling paper is not going to be where it's at. So that's when I got into physician recruiting, because I was like, well, people always need physicians. And that's the other thing, is when you're thinking of a career change, you have to look at what people need right now. Like, where is the need? Where are the trends going? And really study, business and industries and new technology, and how those new technologies and innovations are impacting the jobs that you're interested in. So for me, I knew that we would always need physicians. And so physician recruiting, did really well for me as far as getting me into another industry and trying something different. So, so that's how I got into physician recruiting. And then the way that I got into the media side was really, because I'm still wanting to get back to writing, and I still hadn't done that yet. So I'm still on this detour of trying to figure out, at this time, I'm just trying to make money and trying to pay the bills, and, just kind of have a job that's remotely enjoyable. And I like science. So that was something that was, that's why I got into medical sales, because I'd always liked science, and medicine, intrigued me, and all those things. So, that's when I got a side gig, and the side gig was writing about medical careers. And I totally got it just from a fluke. I was just talking to somebody about work, and she wrote for this website, and she wrote about dentistry. And she was like, you should apply, you should try it. And I'm like, well, I've never been a writer before, professionally. And she was like, neither had I, but you should give it a try. And she encouraged me and helped me, kind of find my way through the process. And so I started doing that on the side. And it just so happened that the website was owned by the New York Times. So that helped a lot, because we had incredible resources backing training and social media. This was in 2007. So blogging and social media were still very new. So again, it was another job that offered training. And so I just happened to get into jobs where it was a new industry, but they offered training because nobody knew about it. So they didn't expect you to know about it. So that was the cool thing, is because everybody was it was new to everybody. So you get into it, and they trained us on how to publish digitally, do digital publishing, how to promote our own content. We had to promote on social media. So that's how I started in the media side. And I'm still working full time as a physician recruiter, working for a physician recruiting firm. And I'm doing this on the side. And my bosses started seeing that I was getting media interviews and I was getting quoted in magazines. And I even was on the radio talking about how to get into healthcare. And they were like, how are you doing this? And I was like, I just am putting myself out there and I have this expertise. And it just so happened that it also coincided with the recession because it was 2007, 2008. And so everybody wanted to get into healthcare because no other industries were hiring at that point.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kind of leveraged that as well. So it's a matter of just looking at what's going on at the time. What are the trends and needs and where do people need information? Where do they need skills? And putting yourself in that position to be the provider of that needed information or trend or skill or whatever's going on.
One of my favorite resources for research, and I give this to a lot of clients in this situation, it's the Department of Labor Occupational Outlook Handbook. And it is fantastic. Like it gives all kinds of statistics on job growth, the type of education needed, and pretty much like any job you can find on there. And that will tell you there are a lot of jobs, especially in healthcare, where you can get like a 2-year certificate and then make good money, and it's fast growing and there's a demand out there. But the Occupational Outlook Handbook gives you all that kind of information. So I tell people, go on there and just start browsing and looking at, you know, think about how much money do you want to make? How much education are you willing to get if you don't have the education? And you can search by, you don't want to have any specialized education, or I'm willing to do 2 years or a 4-year degree, et cetera.
Yep, that is such a great point.
What are some specific challenges that you see people above 50 facing and wanting to make a career change?
I think that, you know, fear is a big thing, and just being stuck in a rut and having done the same thing for so long. And, you know,
or they're getting a divorce and they are just having to start a career. They have never had one. That's very common.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you feel like you're too old to be learning something new or too old to be starting over. But, you know, like you guys, you know, say, you're never too old and it's never too late. So, I mean, there's never any better time than the present. You know, it's just, you just start and make it happen. You know, you just have to set your mind to it and really think about what it is that you want, like you said, and look at like what's reasonable and what's feasible for you and what you need to make and just start planning like how to get there. And, you know, for me, having a side gig has been huge for me. That is one thing that I tell everybody is if you're interested in something, just start doing it on the side. Just, you know, You can do it for very little money because you don't need the money because you have a full-time job. So you can even start out volunteering or just start out at a very low rate and just say, you know, I don't have a ton of experience in this, but I'm willing to do it. And then the great thing is once people see how good you are at it, or once you learn the ropes enough to be good at it, then they'll start paying you more. And then you can transition that into your full-time position. So it's a great way to put your, you know, dip your toe into the pool and just see what you are good at, see what you can learn, see what, you know, just see what you can do with it as a side gig before you have to make that leap. You know, to full time, which is a lot harder to just stop one full time career and go into something full time, have no experience at all.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you know, people years ago, they could say, well, you know, Andrea, AI didn't exist back then. And so many things didn't exist, the social media. So there was all those things to learn, but people are feeling so scared and nervous about losing their jobs. I know myself as a creative and working with writers like yourself and, you know, photographers and videographers, everybody is worried. And I explained to them like, no, actually there's so many jobs to learn. You still need all those people to direct and prompt, and you need prompt writers. It's just doing it a little bit differently. So wondering if you've done any research on that, on careers that are available.
I absolutely have, because as a writer, obviously, that's one of the first things that they're saying that AI is going to eliminate. So that's kind of scary. But I did actually, you know, there is first of all, one of the great things about AI that we don't have to worry about is the fact that it's trained completely on existing information and ideas. So one thing that humans can do that AI cannot is come up with new ideas. And you can try to prompt the heck out of it, and it's not going to be able to come up with a new creative idea. So that's one good thing about it. And that has been proven. I've been listening to a podcaster and reading about that, and people have tried to get it to come up with new story ideas or new creative artistic ideas, and it just cannot. It's only trained on existing ideas. So by the time it might tell you it's a new idea, but it's going to be something that's out there already, and it's pretty cliche. So that's the good news for creatives. And then also, like you said, there's a lot of, it's creating new jobs or kind of changing existing jobs. And, I just tell people, don't be afraid of AI. I've jumped right into it, and I'm learning how to use it, because it can also be like having your own personal assistant and just being able to do more and do it faster and, and more accurately, I think. So I think it's just a great tool and a great resource all around to be able to help people do their jobs. So the people who are not using it and who are afraid to use it, I think are going to be left behind in the dust.
Completely.
And, the key is, and we went through the same thing with, when the internet became a thing and when computers became a thing, we went through the same thing. Everyone was like, oh, computers are going to eliminate so many jobs. Well, they did, but then they also created a whole other, industry of technology and software. So something, it's going to definitely change, and it might be scary, and people may lose jobs. But the key is to stay ahead of it and don't be afraid of it, and figure out how to use it to your advantage, rather than just saying, oh no, I'm not going to do that, it's going to take my job, because then it will probably, if you just...
It definitely will. Yeah, and I've heard too that it's primarily dominated by men. So, which just means that there's so much opportunity for women. I think it's like an 80-20 split or something like that. And I was like, when I tell people that, it's really interesting. And it's like, why? It makes you wonder. Is it because same thing, like men can just go out there and they'll apply for jobs, even if they're you probably know the statistics more, like they're maybe not even 50% qualified, but a female will only apply for it if she feels like she's really closer to the 100. So it's like, do we think that AI is cheating in some sort of way? Some of the females that I've talked to that had not used it, they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about it. And I'm like, there's just such a difference then. But men jump in and they're like, yeah, no problem, we'll use it.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I think that technology in general is typically been a male dominated field in a lot of ways. So maybe just because I think maybe men are just more inclined to try new things. I don't know, and not think of the downside. Maybe I don't know why that is, but I think you're right. I mean, I've talked to a lot of my friends, girlfriends, who have not really tried it, and I was like, well, you need to try it out, and just because they'll ask me a question, I'm like, have you run it through ChatGPT or have you run it through AI? And they're like, no, and they're like, wow, that was great, and they'll try it and realize that it's kind of like just helps with brainstorming and things and organizing thoughts and that kind of thing. But coming up with new creative ideas is not what it's good at. So that's good news for all of us.
It's also not good at design either.
No, really correct. It's definitely not.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So
do you find that a career coach can be helpful for people?
Absolutely. I think when people, when you need someone, you need another set of eyes to look at your body of work, look at your resume. I think when people get kind of pigeonholed into one career, it's hard for them to see outside of it. And so sometimes, you need another perspective, and it's someone who has experience with those kinds of things and knows how the technology works, when you apply for jobs, because now that's a big thing. And they know how recruiters and hiring managers think. And they've been there, done that, and they know the ins and outs, so they can kind of help walk you through those things, and just kind of give you some shortcuts and give you that confidence of like, okay, I know what to expect. I think that's a lot of it, is just that fear of the unknown, not knowing what to expect. If you haven't interviewed in a long time, it can be really scary to think about sitting in a room full of people. My latest job that I got, I had like 4 panel interviews with people sitting around a conference table, and It was very intimidating, and it can be unless you're prepared for it. And so if you have someone that can help walk you through, like, okay, here's how you handle a panel interview, here's how you handle these questions, here's how you handle those questions, because they're all really the same. I mean, there's these common questions that you're going to get asked. They really just want to know, can you do the job, and do you want to be here doing the job? And a lot of people forget that second part. They just want to show how much they can do the job, but they don't want to show how much they want the job or why they should be there. And that's a key part for me as a hiring manager. I would always, if it didn't make sense for someone to take this job, like if it was a step back or a step down in money, I always made them tell me, why do you want this job? Like, why, how do you see yourself fitting in here? Because sometimes there were jobs that didn't really, to me, it just didn't make sense as to why they would want the job. And usually I was pretty accurate with that. Like, for example, we hired a salesperson at one of my jobs, and it was fun. We did mostly phone sales and consulting in this particular role. So you're pounding the phones all day long. And this person had come from outside sales, and they did most of their sales deals on the golf course or at a restaurant, or, they were out, and they were great at it. They had a great personality. They're really good in person. They were athletic. They loved to be outside playing golf. And I'm like, why would this person want to come sit in this office and dial a phone all day? That doesn't make any sense. And so, and everybody thought I was crazy for asking that. And they're like, well, because he does. And I'm like, well, that's not really a good answer. And so sure enough, he came and went through the training and did a great job. But before the year was up, he was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not happy here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
And it was probably in a situation where he's like, oh, I really need it right now. And this seems good. But like, I think, a really common topic is ageism. So I was recruiting for a couple of roles at my last job. And, what I hear from people is they often tend to be scared, thinking that they're like we were saying, like too old, or we're going to choose somebody younger. And honestly, the way the career scope and everything has changed, the landscape, is that we want people who are experienced and mature and want to show up for the job and are going to put forth that effort, because it's really a different landscape right now. It is just, people are not wanting to work. They're not wanting to put in that effort. And it's like, they're really strict on the times they want to come in and come out. And it's really different. So I think like there's so many more opportunities out there once people can get over that mind hurdle.
I agree. Yeah. I think that's very true. There's a lot of skills that the more experienced set of people and, people over 40 bring that a lot of young people are lacking today, especially those who are raised on technology and they don't like having face-to-face conversations. I'm sure you've heard of the millennial stare. And, the interaction, in person is tough for a lot of young people, unfortunately. But fortunately for us who have been around and right. who have, who were raised on interpersonal interaction, and, technology was not the first interaction that we had. So.
Yeah, I remember talking to a former colleague, and she was like in her 20s, and she was just like, well, our generation, we just don't value the same things that you guys do. She's like, we just
fine.
want,
yeah,
right. I was like, okay, we don't want to be putting in all those extra hours because they fear that it's not going to convert to anything. It's not going to bring them the bigger pay or the salaries or anything. So I was like, okay, so what do you imagine that you're going to do then? Once we retire or we move on to other roles, who's going to be running the companies that you're going to be working with? Well, she expects that she's going to open her own company. Okay. Well, who do you think you're going to hire to work for you? That's going to want, and you're going to work harder as an entrepreneur, a business owner. So I'm not sure that really works. And then I've also heard about the generation too, where they're delaying even graduating from college, and they're just taking time off and they're going to travel in Europe, and everybody thinks they're going to be an influencer, and it's not probably the reality.
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset and approach than, what we had. And there's good and bad to both. It's not to say that they're all bad, but there's just certain jobs where they need a certain level of dedication and reliability and consistency and interpersonal interaction and ability to handle a lot of different situations with different types of personalities. And you just have to.
I'll tell you too, maturity, and you would think basic things like the conversations I've had to have about what's appropriate to wear in the office and what's not. Like, maybe let's not wear a sweatpants in the office, or a gym, pants and a sports bra. You're showing your midriff, things like that. Like, it's tough being a manager and having those conversations. I've had to have them before. And those common things, or like, when the CEO comes to visit the office, if he's still in the office and it's 5:00, I don't care what time you got here, stay. Stay. Do not go home,
Yeah.
Like, so many things. It's like, we are like, should be common knowledge. And for them, it's just not. They don't think twice. So I think there's opportunities for those who are already experienced and know just basic how to deal with people.
Absolutely.
Andrea,
and also, go ahead.
I was going to say, how important is networking, and what tips do you have for people over 50 or over 45 to network?
Networking is always important. And I've always been a huge advocate of networking as well, because I think I've gotten almost every single one of my roles through my network. And, I think one thing, that's important about networking is you can't really think of it as just a limited time activity. It should be something that you just do organically throughout all of your interactions, really. I mean,
your whole life, I think you should always.
Yeah. Like, just look to, leave every interaction better than you got, just leave something of value with people in any interaction that you can, whether it's personal or professional. Leave every job on good terms, even if you were mistreated. That's another thing I see. A lot of young people are like, well, should I just, should I tell them off? Should I tell them why I'm leaving? Should I, blah, blah, blah. No, they don't care.
Never.
They don't care. It's not going to change them. They're still going to be the same company. They're going to do the same thing to the next person. They don't care. And all it does is hurt you when you leave on bad terms. And the same thing with networking is just, basic, being kind to people, offering help when you can. Don't always ask for something without offering something in return. Don't just go around and ask everyone, who do you know? Who can you put me in touch with? Think of what you can offer them first before you ask for that favor. So just being reciprocal and trying to make it a two-way interaction, and not just going around begging for contacts or begging for information about open positions. And just being proactive about it. I mean, really just, and staying in touch with people. I always like to connect with people on LinkedIn, so that maybe once we don't work together any longer, we can stay in touch. It's just nice to stay or on Facebook or whatever, app they're on. But LinkedIn is great for professional connections. And I think it lets people know that you want to stay in touch with them and know about their career, and that you're interested in their career, and just drop them a little note and say, I just thought it'd be great to connect here for future reference. I think what you do is so interesting, and blah, blah, blah. Just little things like that just don't take a lot of time, but show that you're interested, you have a curiosity, you're interested in other people and what they do, and not just all about you. Like, what
I was going to say, one thing that I always tell people to do, even if you have what you think is your dream job or your perfect job for now, when an opportunity comes across your inbox and somebody's reaching out and it's like, hey, would you be interested in this? I always say, at least entertain a conversation. Even if you're a little bit interested, because you never know that connection that you might build with somebody, that person will be at the next place that you were looking to go to. Or it's building the relationships with the recruiters and saying, hey, I'm not interested, but actually I'm going to send it off to somebody who is, because it's come around for me so many times that I become like that little networker for them that helps them, so that when I needed to reach out for things, like, they were more than willing to help. And then I've also learned other opportunities that I didn't even know about. I'm like, wow, they're considering me for this. Okay, I'm going to entertain it. But I hear so many people who immediately just, once they get the job, it's almost like similar to relationships. You get settled in your relationship, you're all comfortable, and you neglect your girlfriend. So once you get comfortable in the job, you settle in and you forget about LinkedIn and networking. And I've tried to message people where they're like not active, and then they're only then replying back to me when they're like, oh, I'm just seeing this now, like a year later, when they're out of a job and now they're like, help.
And the thing, oh, I was just going to say, the thing of it is LinkedIn makes it so easy now. They prompt you for everything. So like, it's so easy to like, you get the little things in your feed that say so-and-so had an anniversary or started a new job or whatever. And it's so easy to just like even write the response for you. I mean, literally just click a button and it says, congratulations. And, of course, it's better if you can do it more personally. But even if you just do that, your name's popping up in the feed. They see that you've noticed and you cared enough to comment, and just they make it so easy. There's really no excuse to not just keep some form of, intercommunication going on, via LinkedIn or some of these other apps at the very least. That should be the least. But yeah, networking is important. It should be part of everything you do. It shouldn't be just a one-time thing or, oh my gosh, I got laid off now. What do? I need to send a mass email out to all my friends and say, help. At that point, it's too late. So you definitely want to, just stay in touch with people over the years. It's just a helpful thing to do.
There's a book called The Go-Giver. It's by Bob Berg, but it's about always being on the lookout for how can you give value? And that comes back around for sure.
With that, do you offer any advice or tips on how to stand out? Because you see so many people are applying to jobs over and over again. They're even running AI agents to help apply for them. So do you have any ideas around that? I've had tips where I've gone and made like standout things. Like if I wanted a job at Delta, I went and designed basically these cookies, and I had a cookie artist. Like I designed everything and I had them sent to them. I made paper airplanes and folded it up. I did everything. When I wanted the job at Carter's, I put together a creative package and I sent it directly to the hiring person. Like I'm not just going and filling out a resume online. Boop.
Right.
There's times I have, but when I really want something.
But yeah, I mean, anything you can, creativity is key, and doing something different than the norm obviously is going to get attention. And that's may or may not be possible for everybody if you're applying for a lot of jobs or whatever. But if there is that one dream job that you really, really want, then yes, like, going the extra mile and delivering something to the doorstep or, whatever it is going to be great. But for a lot of people who just need a job, that may or may not be feasible for them. So, even if it's just tailoring your resume is huge. Looking at the job description of the job and then what skills you have that fit specifically that job description. So tailoring your resume instead of sending the same one to all the different companies is key. And also I like to connect with people on LinkedIn for that too. Like I'll send them a note on LinkedIn and say, I see that you're hiring for this role. I just applied. This is why I think I'd be great. This is why I'm interested. So, just kind of making the extra contacts as well as tailoring your resume and the cover note. I don't say cover letter because it's not really a letter anymore, but a cover email or cover note that you send along with it, really explain why you think you'd be a good fit. And again, why you are interested and why that job makes so much sense for you. And they'll see that intentionality, that you're not just applying, the shotgun approach. They want to know that you really want to be there at their company specifically and what you will bring to the table. So
I think it's as equally as important on the front end as it is on the back end. And again, like while I was most recently, interviewing candidates for several roles, the biggest, most shocking thing to me was I take all this time to interview the candidates and I would not receive any thank you follow-ups.
I experienced that too.
And my HR partner was like, Tiffany, it's just the way the times are now. People are just not doing it. I'm like, what?
I know. That drives me crazy. It drives me crazy.
I sent out like little personality tests. It's something I've started doing and people just wouldn't do it. And it's like, well, you obviously don't want the job if you're not going to take, 20 minutes to do this little quiz. So
that's interesting. But yes, I am a huge believer in the thank you note for after an interview.
Yeah.
And even like I said in my last job that I got, I had multiple panel interviews. I sent a different note to every single person on the panel. And I've had some people just send a group email to all of us on the panel. And I was like, ew, that doesn't it's not the same. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm like, because the whole point of it is to, again, show your interest, but also you can reiterate, why you would look forward to working with that particular person and how you think you guys would work well together. And you can overcome any, if there was a question that maybe came up in the interview that you feel like you didn't answer it fully or completely or as well as you could have, you can reiterate, this came up in the interview, and just to reiterate what I said, XYZ. I mean, you can overcome concerns, and there's just so many benefits to sending out that thank you note.
There was something a little, there was something similar to that when I mentioned I really wanted this job at Carter's, and I lived in Florida at the time. And this was like 2007. So the economy was still good until it wasn't the year after. But found who the hiring manager was, mailed them the kit. Then they went to HR, was like, send her in. So they flew me out there for the interview. And I knew that I was going to be like meeting with HR in the morning and then interviewing with the two people in the creative department and a couple other small things. So we sat down, we met, and I'm like, I don't know if I really did well with the talking part. We went to lunch, came back from lunch, and then they were like, okay, now we're going to have you do a design test. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I was so in my mind prepared for like interview that I didn't think like I'd have to put a design hat on. And this is before I knew I had ADHD. And then in a test mode is what I felt it was. And it's certain time allotted that I shut down mentally and I couldn't do it. And I'm sitting there, with the laptop that they're giving me. So it's your unfamiliar setup. Then you have to load fonts, load this. And they were basically like, okay, design a concept for like a baby sale for our Target brand. And I'm like, okay. And I did it. And I was like, oh my God, this sucks. This really sucks. And she's walking me to the elevator and I'm telling her, Vivian, who I still adore. She's like my total inspiration, creative director. I was like, Vivian, I totally bombed that. She's like, no, I'm sure you. I totally bombed it. Like really. And I went home and I couldn't get it off my mind. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to redo it. So I spent that weekend and I redid it and I emailed it to them. And it was like, because of that determination that I got the job, because you're going to learn the skills. To your point, they're going to give you tools. You're going to get better. And you even mentioned, should I've gone to get more education? No, you don't always really need it, because you're going to learn everything you need to know, usually on the job and the experiences. So it was putting in that extra effort. And I was, I felt a lot better about it then, because we all have our off days.
Yeah. And employers want to be wanted. They really want you to want to be there, because they know there's a million other companies out there, and they're investing a lot to bring you on and onboard you and, do everything, all the things that they do to bring you on board. And that whole recruiting cost, it's a lot. And so they don't want that to go to waste. And so they really want you to want to be there for the long term. So you have to convince them of that, during the process, not only that you'll do the job, but that you want to be there too. So that's huge as well.
Are you seeing that a lot more jobs are now requiring going back into the office, and how is the workforce feeling about that?
So I'm not seeing that a ton, a little bit. It's just kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I know a lot of places are going hybrid, where you just work a few days in the office and then several days at home. It's really kind of all over the map at this point. So, you definitely, if you are open to going into an office, you're definitely going to have more options if you're open to going into an office and commuting. And when you are, especially when you're entering the job force or the workforce after a long hiatus, post-divorce or after you raise your children or whatever, you do have to be, a little bit more open, especially at first, until you get back in the door and then you're back working again. So that would be another piece of advice is, when you do go back to work, especially after a long hiatus, you might have to be more open-minded about where you start off. And again, it could just be for a year or two. And then you'll start kind of getting in your groove, and you're networking again. You're in the workforce. You're meeting people. You're learning new skills, and you're building your confidence. And so I would just tell people not to be so hard on themselves about the type of job that they get. If they're re-entering the workforce, and I tell the same thing to people who are changing industries. when I've done a lot of work with people who are trying to get into the healthcare industry. And sometimes initially, you'll have to take a little bit of a step back. So like if you're in sales and you're a VP of sales or something, but you're selling widgets, and then you want to sell something in the healthcare industry, like pharmaceuticals or, whatever, you may have to, you're not going to go from a VP to a VP necessarily. You might need to step back a little bit. It shouldn't be for a long time. It's not like you're going to have to start over. But that initial job in the new industry might be a little bit of a step back or a lateral move, and then you'll move right back up very quickly. So that's another tip that I tell people who are either making a big career move to a different industry or who are getting back into the workforce after a long period off. It's just don't stress out about the first job. Just get something and get going, and then you can move from there.
For those that don't have anything to put on their resume, or how do they, or maybe it has been that gap, how do they handle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you have to be honest about it. You can't really, you have to be honest about it. So I would just include any volunteer work that you did during that time, and be honest with what you were doing. I mean, you were managing your household if you were a full-time mom, and put on there, what all you were doing. I mean, and what organizations you were a member of. I mean, a lot of people, maybe they were volunteering at the school, they were active members of the PTO. I mean, whatever it was you were doing, put that on there, because it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's nothing to try to cover up, because then if you try to sugarcoat it or cover it up, that's going to make it look worse, because then it looks like you're not being authentic, or that you're trying to, kind of pull one over on someone. So just be honest, really. And just, there's different ways you can present your resume to where it's not necessarily chronological. You can do functional resumes, is one type of resume where you just kind of block out, what your experience is and put it into terms of like industries or skills or whatnot. So there are different ways to design your resume to where it's not just chronological. So that's another option as well.
What are some of the more interesting careers that maybe we don't know about that could really apply to us in 40s and up?
Well, I don't know about interesting, but I will say interesting is subjective. Everybody has different things that, they find interesting. But what I will say is there are a lot of fields that I think are more amenable and more welcoming to older applicants, just that I've found in my experience. And that is like government jobs, academia, like school, educational type of roles, those types of things. I think there's really, they're just more amenable to older people of all ages and skill sets and ranges. So those are some where I think, you don't run into the ageism as much. And then like the story that I wrote for the Atlanta Journal, there was that one woman, Beth, who had come from the tech industry, which is extremely, kind of notoriously ageist. So she, was really worried when she got laid off, what she was going to do next. And it probably wasn't going to be tech, because they're just very, that they're all about being young and knowing the newest, latest technology. And that's just, not really the best place to go at that point. So she did a complete, switch of industries, and it does take more time that way. And to tie her over, she took a temporary gig bartending. And again, that's like goes back to what I was saying before, like don't, just be open to something, just do something at first. And that's what she did. She had been a bartender when she was in college and right out of college. And it was just something easy for her to fall back on, and just to make money and get out there and be active and meeting people and doing something to kind of build her confidence back up after a layoff, which can be devastating. So, that goes back to just do something, get a job doing something, even if it's not the long-term fit that you want, just kind of use it as a stepping stone. And she actually ended up enjoying it so much going back to bartending that she's going to continue to do it as a side gig, even after even after she got her full-time career, her full-time job, which was she's going to be working for a wine distributor. So it kind of gets her into that,
Yes.
hospitality experience that she had. She's still using that because it is a wine distributor, but she's using a lot of the skills that she used in business as well. Because I think I can't remember exactly what her role was, but it was something like operational or related to like regional sales or something like that. So she was using a lot of her business experience along with that hospitality. And, so she's doing that full time. And then she's continuing to pick up bartending shifts on the weekends and nights because she found it so enjoyable. At age 60, which I think is so great and so fun. And she goes, one of the things she said in the article is she noticed that back in the day when she was in her 20s, they would fight over shifts. If someone, if a shift came available, everybody was fighting. I want that shift. I want to pick it up. And she said now they have, it's like pulling teeth to get people to pick up shifts. And like to your point earlier. And so that it's definitely a paradigm shift and mindset shift of how, the younger crowd, they're really all about balance and life balance.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
They're big about
they
that.
just will not, yes, they just, if there's an extra shift, they're like, too bad, I've worked my shifts for this week and I don't want it. And so it's great for her because she'll just pick them up. And, so she's noticed it too. Everybody kind of notices that it's definitely a different mindset now. So
it is completely different mindset. Yeah. I felt like when I was interviewing the folks, they immediately wanted to know like what benefits we were offering and what was the work-life balance and everything, like more for them. And I'm like, well, I felt like I had to like sell them on it, but I'm like, actually, you're the one who's needing this job, right? Like we already have our corporation and our culture and everything established. It's a matter of now whether you fit into that or not. So did you have some other examples of people that you interviewed that were interesting to share?
Well, so the other thing that reminds me of, is when you are interviewing, you definitely want to have questions to ask them at the end when they ask. And the questions should not be, what are your benefits or how much time off do I get? Those are not the questions that you should be asking at that point. So you definitely want to show that you've researched the company. I noticed that you've got this initiative that you started. How do you foresee that, growing over the next few years? Or how do you see this role changing or growing over the next couple of years? Ask them like strategic, questions about them, not about what's in it for you at that point. That is not the time to ask those questions. So that's a good
yeah
as well.
One thing that I always like to lean into was like, how is it that I could help you? Or what is something that I could do better? And they're immediately like, whoa, wow. And I also like to research the person, see if there's any like articles that they've written or podcast interviews or any little nuggets so you can like weave a thread of connection. And
yes, absolutely. That's a great tip. And another thing that I love to ask in interviews when I'm a candidate, and it's always worked well for me, is what, if any, what concerns or questions do you have for me about my ability to do the job well?
That's the one I learned about recently. Yes. And that was a great one because it allows them to fill that gap in.
Yep. And you can overcome any concerns, if they say, well, we're not sure about this. And you could say, well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually do have experience with that, so it's a great way to really have a chance to overcome any doubts or concerns that they might be having that haven't yet come out in the interview. So that's always worked really well for me as a candidate.
Yeah, I love that. So if you had to restart your whole career today, fresh and brand new, what would you do?
So that's a great question. I mean, ultimately, this isn't too far of a cry. I have two parts of this answer. One would be a novelist, which is still a writer, but not really the kind of writer that I am. So I would love to be a novelist and just, live on a beach somewhere and look out over the water while I write my books and, just make $1 bazillion. But and then the other thing would be I know this is like, I think I mentioned earlier that I really am interested in science. I think I would be a geneticist. Like I would love to have studied genetics and go into like genetic counseling, because so much of what I'm learning about in my healthcare writing and roles now is that genetics play such a key role in how healthcare impacts us, from, how we react to a medication to, which medication, how a disease even manifests or plays out in our body. And it's so much of it is genetic, and it's really opening up a whole, personalized medicine field. And so that fascinates me. Because I think for so long, you know, we've just had all these drugs and things thrown at us. And it's like, you know, if it works for one person, it'll work for these 1,000 people. And I just feel like they're finally opening up that whole world of like looking into our makeup and like how everything
completely
is by that. So,
yeah. So you were so determined throughout all your careers and you just went after it, but that's not always the case and so easy for others. So where do you find your confidence and your positive mindset from to keep you going?
I guess just, you know, looking at the little wins, like looking at every little win that you get, you know, if you, you know, if you apply for a job and you get called back for an interview, even if you don't get the job, the fact that you got an interview is huge in today's world, especially when there's like thousands of applicants for every job.
Yeah.
So I guess just looking at those small wins and then also just knowing that you've come this far, you know, at our age, as you get older, like you have survived 100% of the challenges that have been put in front of you. So you'll survive this too. It's just, you know, a matter of getting through it like you have all the other ones before, you know. So that's one of the good things about being in our 40s plus is that we have been through so much that we know we can do it because we've done it before. So
I was going to say, Jeanette and I talked about this before other times in our dating episodes, but I mean, for those that are single, right? I've been on so many dates and people would say like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're going on these dates. And I'm like, no, actually, I've gotten really better at interviewing people and I've met a lot of great connections that way too.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be single to do that. You could just be like going to networking or meetup events and get yourself out there and just talk and practice even that way.
I think that's such good advice and it's so huge. And really the bottom line is, like you said, just putting yourself out there in every way possible, whether it's volunteering, getting a side gig, meeting new people, going on a date, going to a new club. I mean, just, you know, connecting with people online. If you know, have a lot of time to get out, it's just putting yourself out there and making those connections with as many people as you can and not always looking at it as like, oh, well, this person doesn't work in the field that I want to be in, so I'm not going to connect with them. Well, connect with them because they're interesting and you want to have a new person to learn from or connect with or talk to, you know, so.
Yeah. And you never know who they might know.
Exactly. And just putting yourself out there and being curious and interested in other people, I think is the key to a lot of things in life, really.
Yeah. And I think too, like, you know, I remember when I wanted to switch careers, I made it like a mini part-time job. It was an everyday thing. I set aside a certain amount of time and I went and applied, and then I would keep everything very organized in a folder because oftentimes, and this was a tip I used to tell people all the time, if you go and apply for jobs and then I would keep a track, like I would screenshot all the job listings and keep them in a folder and I would color code them. I'm at a Mac. So I'd be like green that I did it. And then if I heard back and I didn't, you know, I got denied, it would be red or yellow. I'd make a system, move them into folders. But the most important thing about screenshotting the whole description was sometimes these people are pulling down the job, they're closing the job online. So you no longer know what the listing is. And then they're like 2 months later, hey, I want to interview for this job. Why were you interested? I'm like, what was the job even about? I have no idea. And especially if you're applying and trying many different things, you all of a sudden are caught like, so that was my little method is like, you can't just save the links because links are going to get pulled down. People are pulling them down because it costs money to host them. Screenshot them.
Yes, that is so true. And also, you know, those platforms can be a great resource to some extent, but you really have to broaden your job search to include other ways, whether it's, you know, whether it's just going to the sites of the companies that you want to work for and looking directly on their website for openings, or looking on, you know, or just asking people that you know, or just there has to be other, you can't just focus on just the online platforms because a lot of people will post jobs on there just to mine candidates, or they'll post jobs because they want to show that they're growing. They're trying to show growth even when they're not really hiring. So there's like a bazillion jobs out there that aren't even really legitimate jobs. So it's really a numbers game, and you have to use a lot of different methods and, apply in volume. Unfortunately, that's what my candidates have told me.
And never give your social security number because there's so many scams going on right now. I mean, I almost got caught in one of those once.
I did too. I had somebody try to set up an interview with me. And then when they said they wanted me to connect with them on WhatsApp, I was like, that's really weird. What? Yeah. And then, and they used real companies, real names of people. Oh, my dogs are crazy. And so I went on LinkedIn and I reached out to the guy on LinkedIn and he was like, that wasn't me. That wasn't me that did that. We've had people doing that lately. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. But yeah, so it's definitely a lot of scams. You have to be very careful about that as well. So if anything feels off, like any questions that they ask, or if they ask you to send money for your laptop or whatever, like those work from home scams that sound so good to be true, and they are too good to be true. So anything that sounds too good to be true, like, oh, we'll pay you to stay at home and process orders on your laptop and we need money for you to buy your laptop, then run the other way. So
absolutely not. So while we wrap up here, so what's some your biggest tips that you can give somebody who is wanting to make a career change or is currently out of work and wanting to find something?
I guess the biggest tip is just try to not lose hope and don't give up hope. Because as long as you have that and you just keep moving forward, one step at a time, try not to get overwhelmed by the process, and just take it day by day and focus on all the things that you do bring to the table, because you bring a lot to the table that a lot of younger people do not. And, it will take time. But, just try not to get discouraged and just keep moving forward, like one step at a time. So that's pretty much it. And there was one other thing that we didn't talk about that I didn't know if you wanted to include was about going back to school or getting new classes or training or whatnot. I was just going to add that, that's another thing that can be overwhelming, because I think a lot of people are programmed to think they do need to go back to school. And that's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. And there are some cases where people do it and it works out and it's great. If you have the money and time, that's wonderful. But if you don't let that be your obstacle for making a change. Don't get so hung up on that. Like, oh, I can't go back to school, so I can't get a new career. Oh, well, there are so many ways, like I said, through a side gig or whatever. And then also online, there's tons of training online. LinkedIn has a whole, basically universities full of information on LinkedIn. Also, YouTube has a ton of stuff, and then professional associations. And professional associations are a great way to get into a new industry as well, by going ahead and joining them and getting involved in them, and then getting webinars or classes that they offer as well. And they sometimes will cost a little bit of money, but nothing compared to like going back to school and getting an entirely new degree or whatnot. So there's a lot of ways to get those new skills and training and whatnot without having to go back and get a whole other degree. So,
yeah. And then during that time period too, I always recommend saying like, subscribe to LinkedIn Premium, because you're going to get access to a lot more and
yes.
You can message a lot more people too, which is really beneficial. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So where can people read your work and follow you along?
Yeah, so you can find me at theajc.com for Aging in Atlanta, which is published once a month, but the articles are up there like all the time. But then also you can find me at I own a media consultancy, and that's clem.co, CLEM.co, and then also careercollateral.com. So those are where you can find me and learn more about job searching or promoting yourself or your company or whatever I can help you with. That's where you find me. So.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So make sure to keep listening and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at A Holistic Dose on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for more fun. And visit our website at aholisticdose.com. Thanks again.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.